Have you ever been in a movie theater where the audience starts a round of applause when the movie ends? If so, what movie was it? Lord of the Rings, The Return of the King. That midnight showing was my favorite theater experience. Cosplayers, legitimately funny commenters, and a couple of kids sang a song they wrote about Lotta while we waited for the projector to get fixed. I've never heard a legitimately funny commentator in a movie theater. What kind of comments do you remember? It's all in the delivery. You can do it. Got a ton of laughs when Sam got married. A round of applause? That's nothing. I was at the midnight showing of Rocky IV on opening night in one of the biggest theaters in suburban Detroit, working class town. Height of the Cold War, Rocky taking on the Soviets. It was mayhem. During the final fight sequence, there was a guy in the row in front of us standing on his seat yelling "Duck him up, Rocky!" Exclamation mark. Exclamation mark. At the screen. He was almost drowned out by the rest of the audience cheering. It was a wild night. At the other end of the spectrum was when I went to see Peter Jackson's WWI documentary They Shall Not Grow Old. Most of the audience were old enough to have had grandparents or even parents fight in that war. At the end of the movie, stunned silence. You could hear a pin drop. I experienced the silence at the end of Saving Private Ryan during opening weekend. At the end of a movie you usually have people talking about the movie or making jokes or whatever, but I remember everyone in the theater just quietly filing out into the lobby. At least for me, I remember feeling like I had been run over by a tank and just trying to take it all in. I'm pretty sure a lot of folks felt the same way. I saw it in Singapore. An old local man in his 80s was in front of me with his daughters. The poor man was visibly shaking during the beach landing scene. I suspect the bullet sounds alone triggered something from back in the war. He had to leave. Strangely and somewhat perversely, it made the movie a better experience for me. Endgame opening night. My opening night watching it was pretty crazy. My theater became a stadium once Cap wielded Mjolnir and every Avenger entered onto the battleground. I just really wished I got to relive my cinema experience. Avengers Assemble, that's when everybody in the theater I was in went nuts and I damn near shed a tear mayo. It was the most applause I've ever heard in a theater, and this was about 3 days after it had premiered too. It was crazy. Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows 2. Most of the audience also cheered when Bellatrix was blown to pieces. Not my daughter. UB! Exclamation mark. Exclamation mark. The packed theater I was in definitely cheered as well. Great moment / call out. The first time I saw it there was someone that yelled, "Get her." It was the only line I was hoping and praying made it into the movie. Such a satisfying scene. Exclamation mark. It wasn't a round of applause. Exactly. But I went to a midnight showing of Infinity War, and the mood, when the credits rolled, was like nothing else. It was about 3 in the morning on a weeknight, and maybe 30 people had turned up, and not one of them got up from their seats. Despite the fact that by rights they should have been pretty eager to get home to bed, no one moved. It was like the entire audience was holding its breath. I mean, sure, anyone who goes to see an MCU movie at midnight knows well enough to stay for the end credits sequence, but there's still usually people gathering their coats and finishing their drinks. This was just like everyone in the room had been punched in the gut and didn't know quite how to deal with it. Not before or since have I ever had that shared sense of what the duck. After seeing a movie, I remember leaving the theater and a line was formed outside the theater room's doors for the next showing. Everyone was silent except for the people in line. I heard one girl express, "Why does everyone look so sad?" Apostrophe. It's something how everyone was so respectful about spoilers for I Went Egg. Even on the internet. 22 movies over the course of a decade. I can't imagine anyone wants to be the one to ruin that for people. The Dark Knight. Deadpool 2. Sonic the Hedgehog. Ah yes, my favorite trilogy. I saw Black Panther in Oakland. There was applause when the movie started. Came here to say this. I saw it at Grand Lake. Independence Day. Just past midnight, July 4th, 1996. Yep, standing ovation with cheers and whoops in my little hometown. To be fair, A large portion of the audience were high schoolers. But it was wild. Saving Private Ryan. There were 2 rows of veterans from WW2 behind us. It was an emotional experience. Exact opposite experience for me when I saw it in the theater. There was absolute silence from the audience when it ended. Everyone walked out without saying a single word to anyone else. I feel it would have been the same if the veterans weren't there. When it showed the flag at the end, they all stood up and saluted. Many of them were crying. Cats. The entire front row must have been high as duck. It got a standing ovation from everyone in the theater. Most fun I've had at a movie ever. Terrible movie. Terrible musical. Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, not at the end, but at the leap of faith part, it was just something that everyone started clapping at. That was a pretty epic part. That whole movie is amazing. Endgame and Star Wars The Force Awakens. I hadn't felt the rush of being in a theater until I saw those movies. People were shouting, crying, laughing out loud, making jokes, cheering the characters on. It was amazing. It felt like a family that came together for the duration of the movie. At the end, we all stood up for a round of applause. I thought for sure I had seen my final Star Wars movie when I went to see Episode 3 on opening night in 2005. The shared elation of a packed theater when the opening crawl started for The Force Awakens was something else. Lots of applause at the end of Return of the King as well. I couldn't even hear the Hammer Cap v Thanos fight because people were absolutely losing it. Also, assemble. Every single person in the theater lost it during this scene. It was beautiful and perfect. I get chills every time somebody ducking mentions it. I wish I could relive that moment again. Surreal. Superman. The first movie. Star Trek Second The Wrath of Khan. Empire Strikes Back. First stunned silence. Then clapping and cheering. Wrath of Khan left me in stunned, tearful silence. I was a kid experiencing the Star Trek universe for the first time and I didn't know about the search for Spock yet. It was also my first experience with my favorite character from a series dying. My 80-year-old mother started clapping at the end of Inglourious Bastards. I read somewhere that a dude took his veteran grandpa to see that movie. The grandfather screamed hallelujah at the end. This probably the most wholesome thing I will read all day. When Harrison Ford walked back into the Falcon, Chewie, were home. All 3 of the lot of movies. At the time they were masterpieces. At the time. Exclamation mark. Those movies have held up ridiculously well, and I truly believe they will continue to do so for a very, very long time. I may have a biased opinion though. I still watch them pretty often. I just feel that the Hobbit movie has kind of tarnished the name, and every time I try to watch them, I just can't stop thinking about that. The Hobbit should be recut into one 4-hour good movie, and we can pretend the rest doesn't exist. In case you were wondering, some fans already did this. Very high quality stuff. And yes, it makes the movies much, much better. It wasn't at the end, but years ago, when I saw Stephen King's A Mist in the theater. Everyone applauded loudly when Mrs. Carmody was shot dead. I saw SE7N in the theater and people cheered when Brad Pitt shot the bad guy. That was a twisted moment all round. Infinity War and Endgame. Every time I saw them both, there was only silence when I walked out of I1. Same here. The entire theater was dead silent through the credits after Infinity War. It was like people were afraid to breathe. I don't think I spoke till we were in the car. The first Star Wars movie in 1977. The week it opened in DC. Came here to say this. First showing in Omaha. 1977. Not many people, but they all started clapping at the end. Pretty smooth move by Lucas. Grindhouse. Remember that absolutely awesome double feature of Tarantino and Rodriguez? Even in my small town it got a standing ovation at the end. I got up to go use the bathroom during the intermission with all the fake trailers. Right as the one for Thanksgiving was wrapping up. Rose from my suite, just before it cut to the guy ducking the turkey with the severed head on it. And that image completely ducked up my coordination. I went tumbling onto the floor, choking on laughter. Soda spilled all over my dumbass. Bore it. Full cinema of people laughing hysterically from start to finish deserved the applause. I still remember that one to this day. I never experienced the entire audience losing their shit so badly. It was pure laughing insanity. When the final Harry Potter came out, I went to a showing that played part 1, then bang on midnight part 2 came out. People clapped at the start and end of part 2 and cheered and clapped at specific parts. It was a real good crowd of fans. Bohemian Rhapsody. It wasn't even opening night, but there were a lot of people in the audience who were teens or young adults during Queen's heyday. Lots of crying. The last 20 minutes or so, the recreation of the Live Aid set was great, but the rest of the movie was horseshit. Massively inaccurate. 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri. A damn good movie, but that bittersweet end. I don't think I'd clap. Okay, so it was my mom that started the clapping. My mom won a bunch of movie coupons and wanted to take the whole family for a movie night. My mom loved musicals, so we ended up seeing The Greatest Showman. I was sitting right next to my mom, and when the movie ended I saw her put her hands up to clap. I told her not to clap, but she ended clapping even harder and causing the entire audience to follow her claps. My mom looks at me and said, "I don't care. It was good. Can I adopt your mom?" I used to go to a lot of midnight release showings, and it didn't really take much. If someone was motivated to be present, then they were more than likely to clap regardless of the film. The ones I remember offhand that had standing ovations are The Matrix Reloaded, The Matrix Revolutions, Star Wars Episode 2, 3, The Fellowship of the Ring, The Dark Knight, Snakes on a Plane. Most enthusiastic theater I've ever been in by far. Get Out and any Star Wars film. Had the same experience with Get Out. The election had just happened a few months before, I think. Trump had been inaugurated last month. There was one moment, you know the moment, when the whole theater just erupted in the level of cheers and laughter that I don't think I've ever heard at a movie theater. Love moments like that. Behind Enemy Lines. It came out shortly after 9/11. There were 2 rounds of applause. The first was a scene with Gene Hackman refusing to leave his pilot behind, and then the end. The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Rings. The 2 chicks in front of me were so confused. But that's not really an ending. I mean, you don't even know how it ends. Apostrophe. I'm guessing they only came because they saw a trailer and realized how hot Viggo Mortensen was in a tunic and leggings. D. I feel like you would have to make more of an effort to make Viggo not hot. I think an agent of the enemy would look fairer, but feel fouler. Apostrophe. Excuse me, Frodo? Dances with Wolves. Schindler's List, yes. Immold. Schindler's List. Applause would be kinda weird. I remember being in the theater. The credits rolled. The lights came on. And nobody moved. Nobody was talking. Just silence. I saw it the week it opened in Century City, and when it was over, we all just sat there. I don't think anybody moved or spoke until the credits had finished. It was very emotional, but then so is the movie. Yes, once. It was an anime movie, but in deference to the crowd, some of the creators were actually there as special guests that came from Japan to Germany for the premiere screening and talked about the movie and answered fan questions. So the applause had a meaning. It was an anime movie. Anime's a medium, not really a genre. Something like Grave of the Fireflies hits completely differently to Pokémon 2000. People applaud in cinemas? What? Why? For whom? Around here people get up and leave the moment the credits roll in an attempt to be the first out of the parking lot and avoid the car polonaise. Same. I have never encountered it in the UK at the movies I have been to see. We don't do that here. Me and my siblings, living in the UK, like to do this for films that break the mold. For me it's like thanking the film for the experience. I'll always stay through the credits if the movie was good enough to stick with it to the end. But if it's exceptional I'll applaud. Sometimes other audience members will join in. It feels like a nice way to engage with the movie. I've clapped at the end of Django Unchained, Interstellar, The Revenant, Birdman, and Fury Road amongst others. It's got to have the right combination of good writing, acting, photography, music, and themes. Hey PSSST, please subscribe and like.